I lost my love for Overwatch in the same manner as I did with my ex. Things started out great, they were sleek, full of ambition, and promised me the world. But in the end, they turned into a bloated, directionless mess. I'm sorry Overwatch, it's not me, it's you. You changed for the worse. You changed your gameplay to fit a meta that you don't even know. And you're split in the middle between being a competitive game or a casual game. But, do you know what attracted me to Overwatch in the first place? It was its colorful characters and team-based gameplay. It looked like a spiritual successor to Team Fortress 2. A chaotic casual hero shooter overflowing with love and passion in it. Overwatch also felt like the Super Smash Bros. Of shooters. A lot of heroes felt like they were pulled straight out from other games and placed into Overwatch. Soldier with Call of Duty, Torb and Mercy as Engineer and Medic from Team Fortress 2, Pharah with Tribes, Doomfist from fighting games. The sheer amount of variety in these different gameplay styles contributed in Overwatch's initial popularity, because no matter what games you've played before, you'll find a hero that played somewhat familiar to you. But that statement no longer rings true in Overwatch 2. 4 out of the 5 heroes listed receive reworks that strip them of their identity. Overwatch has been turning its heroes' unique gameplay into just different flavors of singular roles. Let's use the short Swedish man that cast a long shadow, Torbjorn, as an example for the damage role. In Overwatch 1, Torb's identity focused on playing around his turret and supporting his team with armor packs. In Overwatch 2, Torbjorn just uses his turret as a second gun, and he can't support his team anymore because armor packs got cut. So if you like Torb for his defense-oriented gameplay, tough luck. Overwatch tells you to get with the times. Overwatch said this same exact thing to Mercy when she got her rework. A big portion of Mercy's original uniqueness came from her old ultimate Mass Resurrection. If you forget what that is, it let you revive your teammates in a small area. Mass Res got reworked because it turned the game into a game of hide and seek. She can still resurrect people after her changes, but the trade-off is her new ultimate, Valkyrie, is now arguably the least impactful ult in the entire game. All Valkyrie lets Mercy do is fly around and provide her team with a discount Transcendence or Orisa Bongo. Mercy's identity changed drastically from Anduin in World of Warcraft to just a heal bot. The last hero I want to mention is Hanzo. Originally, Hanzo played as a methodical sharpshooter. His arrows traveled sluggishly slow compared to presently, and his old ability, Scatter Arrow, on paper at least, needed to be aimed well to hit enemies behind cover. In practice, Scatter Arrow was actually like a shotgun that would one-shot people by simply aiming at their feet. Blizzard, in response to Scatter Arrow's problems, reworked Hanzo into Spamzo. His arrow projectile speed got buffed, meaning you didn't have to lead targets as much and making it more effective to spam corners. Most importantly, Scatter Arrow got replaced with Storm Arrow, an ability that turned his bow into a machine gun. You can't exactly be a methodical sharpshooter with a machine gun, now can you? All 3 of these reworks share a common trait with each other: their gameplay got streamlined. Overwatch doesn't want any hero to have any quote-unquote slowness in their moment-to-moment gameplay, like collecting scrap metal with Torb. Why would you want to do that when instead you could just be running around and shooting at the enemy? The main problem with this streamlining gameplay is it makes the heroes start to feel too similar with each other in how they play. Torb and Hanzo aren't too different now on paper. Both are projectile heroes focused on getting headshots, they have a rapid fire like ability, prefer to play at medium distance, they have a zoning ult, and so on. Yes, there are differences between them, but my question is this: should they have so much in common in the first place? They don't feel like unique kits anymore, just different alterations of a single baseline kit. This problem also applies to newer heroes as well. Their kits just feel like alterations of already existing kits, like Ashe and Cassidy. To use Smash Bros as an example, it'd be like if Sakurai reworked Link into an Echo Fighter of Marth, and when asked for his reasoning, Sakurai just mumbles something about wanting consistency in the gameplay and addressing power creep. Unlike Smash Bros, Overwatch doesn't have much of a problem with power creep, but it does have a deadly disease known as support creep. It's no secret that supports dictate the meta through 2 ways. 1, AoE healing, 2, their utility. Before I get into more depth on these 2 issues, I want to bring up what many consider to be the glory days of Overwatch's life: the 2016 through 2017 dive meta. When you read discussions about why people love this meta, they'll bring up a number of aspects, such as the meta heroes at the time, the balancing around those heroes, or simply because Break hadn't been added to the game yet. But the most important element about why people love this dive meta was that healing was still kept in check, because it was mostly single target at the time, meaning that only 2 people were getting healed during teamfights. Compare that to Overwatch 2, where everybody is getting healed in teamfights. Back during the dive meta, only Moira could provide consistent AoE healing, but that came at a price. Moira provided no utility for her team, so if you ran her, you'd have to give up on either speed boost, anti-heal, discord, and etc. But then heroes like Baptiste and Brigitte came out who provided both AoE healing and strong utility in their respective kits. That brings us to point 2, the insanely powerful utility that supports have access to. In an attempt to keep this video a reasonable length, because I don't want to get into a 6-hour long lecture about these support abilities, I'll just focus on these 2 powerful ones. Immortality Field and Suzu. These basic abilities deny ultimates too easily. Having basic abilities deny ultimates is an issue in itself, such as say a diva eating a Mei ult, because it's not something the diva can do consistently and easily. Now imagine this, you're a Reinhardt who landed a fat shatter on the enemy team. Just as you're about to start swinging away, a Kiriko or Bap tosses their cuck ability, cucking you from your amazing shatter. How does that feel? You're Reinhardt, you've been getting speared in the face, walled off, slept this entire game, and now you finally get a moment to get some much needed cathartic release. Only for you to get blue-balled by a little Japanese girl. Poor Reinhardt, man. Maybe one day the meta will actually favor him. But that day won't come anytime soon, because Blizzard doesn't understand how metas work. Metas work by being created by the players. We're the ones who decide on what heroes and team comps are good. That's why the meta over in Korea is vastly different compared to the one in NA. Both regions are playing the same game, but are playing it differently. The same is also true for different competitive ranks. The meta in Masters versus say Gold and below are starkly different. It's important to note, however, metas aren't written in stone. A hero that might be labeled bad in a meta might actually be very good if played in a certain way. I think fighting games like Tekken are a good example of this. A professional Tekken tournament player named Rangchu won the 2018 Tekken World Tour tournament with one of the lowest tier characters at the time, Panda. Rangchu won this tournament through time and dedication spent unlocking Panda's full potential. You cannot do the same thing in Overwatch because Overwatch will rework any heroes that are considered bad. That makes it feel pointless for you to even try to master these heroes such as say Doomfist, Pharah, Sombra, Symmetra, Bastion, Torb, and eventually Wrecking Ball. I realize at this point I'm probably coming off as being completely against Reworks entirely, but that can't be further from the truth. Reworks are a great tool at fixing fundamentally flawed heroes like Orisa 1.0. Back then, Orisa played like a crippled turtle strapped with a gun. What I mean by that is she played painstakingly slow in her gameplay. All she did was sit in one spot and shoot nerf darts at the enemy. Now in Overwatch 2, she plays like one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Orisa needed to be reworked back then because she was too flawed for the entire game. Her gameplay felt lethargically slow, and I know I was saying earlier that slowness isn't a bad thing for a hero, but Orisa didn't even have to move to win a game. Let's compare that to another hero's rework that's more recent, Pharah. Do you think Pharah's original kit was flawed entirely to the point of needing a full rework, or was it just only flawed for competitive since Pharah Mercy combo is pretty annoying to deal with? Here's a question for you. Was Pharah the cause for that annoyance, or was she only a symptom of Mercy's flaws? Pharah did not need a rework in my opinion. At most, maybe some small adjustments to her kit to not make her so reliant on a pocket. Overwatch reworked Pharah because she was only flawed for competitive. She was fine for everything else in the game though, such as quick play. That's Overwatch's main issue when it comes to the meta. They constantly keep changing it to fit their vision on how the game should be played on a competitive standpoint. That philosophy isn't a bad thing for when, say, GOATS is terrorizing competitive. Except the problem is that they keep changing their mind on what they want Overwatch to look like as a competitive game. Before the dark times of GOATS, the community lived in harmony with the rule of 2s. That is, 2 tanks, 2 supports, and 2 damage dealers. That was a definite meta back then. But this meta wasn't written in stone. You could still shake things up like say running 3 DPS and only 1 tank. Then Brig came out, and she brought with her GOATS. GOATS might not have killed Overwatch, but it came damn near close to. It at least put the game on life support. Blizzard lacked any conviction in responding to Brig slowly killing their game. Eventually they just gave up and made the rule of 2s into actual law with the introduction of roll queue. Now you are forced to run the 2-2-2 meta. I hate this change because it stifles the creativity for both players in choosing what their team composition should be, and I hate it for developers because now when they create new heroes, their first concern must be how this hero fits into the meta, instead of just concerning themselves first with making a fun hero. Wrecking Ball and Reinhardt are victims of Overwatch changing the constant meta. They sometimes fit into the meta, but more often than not, they don't. Because they weren't originally designed around having only one tank, 2 damage dealers, and 2 healers. They can work in a team composition, but really, you're just handicapping yourself with these heroes because other tanks do their job better in the meta. Role Queue fulfilled its purpose in abolishing the goats to the Shadow Realm, but it didn't fix the core issues that enabled goats in the first place, which was the abundance of healing. And that problem has only grown bigger in Overwatch's 2 change to the 5v5 format. I'm not going to spend much time discussing 6v6 versus 5v5 because it's been talked to death at this point. I personally don't like 5v5 because it didn't fix the problem with 6v6, which is healing. Healing was pretty nutty in Overwatch 1 and it's only gotten worse in Overwatch 2. Yes, the current season, which is 9 at time of writing this video, did fix healing with the introduction of the new DPS passive. But how many new problems are going to arrive with this change? I must admit, I haven't played much of this season, but from the few games I did play, I can tell you that tank somehow feels even worse to play, and that most supports don't feel good to heal with, such as Iari or Lifelever. I've come to this conclusion about Overwatch's philosophy on how they handle solutions. They take 1 step forward and 2 steps backwards. They fix one issue, but add 5 other ones. The thing is, when it comes to Overwatch and how they implement solutions, is that they take the weirdest and most obtuse approach when making changes, instead of just making direct changes. Here's an example, Nanoblade. Do you know what Nanoblade does wrong? These 2 ultimates synergize too well with each other. Now Blizzard can't buff Dragon Blade without first taking into consideration how Nano Boost will first interact with it. Ana is effectively gatekeeping Genji from getting his ult buff, and I don't think that's a good game philosophy to have for your game. No hero should dictate another hero's balance to such a degree. Since Nanoblade synergizes so well together, but the ultimates on their own are fine, why not just nerf this specific synergy? And first, I'll give credit where it's due. I first heard this idea I'm about to mention from Samito. Let's just make it so Genji is incapable of receiving any offensive buffs, say like damage boost, while he's in Dragon Blade. This change would allow Blizzard to actually buff Dragon Blade because Dragon Blade without Nano Boost currently is a really bad ultimate. Let's look at a more extreme case. Brigitte terrorizing the game on her initial release. What Overwatch needed to do at the time was immediately vault Brigitte away. That doesn't mean delete Brig from the game, but instead just disable her from the roster and rework her in-house. Again, I want to mention that I first heard this idea from Samito. And after hearing that idea from him, I kept wondering that to myself. Why didn't Blizzard just vault her away? Why did they let her terrorize the game for months, or years even, depending on your perspective? I don't think I will ever know the answer to that question. But what I do know is that Symmetra perfectly symbolizes Blizzard's issues with reworking heroes to fit their constantly shifting vision of the meta. At launch, Symmetra's uniqueness came from being the only support who couldn't heal her allies. Her support relied on giving a small 25 HP buff and locking down choke points with her turrets, her short range lock-on beam, and spammable orbs. Her ultimate at the time, Teleporter, would teleport respawn teammates from spawn to the battlefield. Symmetra's original kit, while unique, felt lacking. The pieces were there for her to be a non-healing support character, but those pieces didn't mesh well together. Her kit felt lacking and unfinished because she was only viable on the first point. After first point, she became redundant. Blizzard then reworked Symmetra, and in my opinion, perfected her design with the rework. Her shield ability got replaced with a Proto Sigma shield, giving her a proactive way to support her team. She also gained another ultimate too, Shield Generator. She would place Shield Generator down and it would give your team a 75 HP buff in a gigantic area. This rework fixed Symmetra's problems and actually made her feel good to play. Tragically though, most of the community still viewed her as garbage because she didn't heal. During these days, people kept demanding on the forums that Symmetra should be shifted over to the DPS role. In their minds, supports are only heal bots. Therefore, Symmetra can't be a support because she cannot heal. Blizzard, in their misguided wisdom at the time, decided to agree with this argument and rework Symmetra. And I cannot emphasize this much. It was a horrible mistake because it set a horrible precedent. All supports must be healers. It's this very precedent that is the root cause for heal creep in Overwatch. There's only so many ways you can implement healing into a first-person shooter. The precedent also stifles creativity as well. When the developers are making new heroes, they can't ask themselves, what's a cool idea for a new support hero? They instead must ask themselves first, what's a cool new way to heal in Overwatch? And it's all because Symmetra got booted out of the support role. And do you know what they did to her? Do you know how they reworked her for the third time? They transformed her into a Frankenstein's monster. I'm not being dramatic either. Let me list out what body parts got stitched onto her. Her beam now functions exactly like Zarya beam. Her secondary fire, the orbs, are Pharah rockets now. They're fast projectiles that explode on impact. Before, the orbs were slow, but they could pass through shields and people. Teleporter got reworked into a Reaper teleport for your team. And her ultimate is now just a big Reinhardt shield. The only aspect that Symmetra got to keep from her original design were her turrets. And ironically enough, I actually really enjoyed this version of Symmetra, to the point that I even got Masters with her in one season. But even after all those games I played on her, I can't really tell you what her specific identity is on a team. Symmetra can flank, she can set up ambushes, she can lock down choke points, she can break shields, she can melt tanks, she can spam her projectiles, she can assassinate people, and blah blah, you get it. Symmetra can do a lot of things, but she can't do anything better than other heroes besides teleporting her team. Do you get what I mean by saying that Symmetra symbolizes Overwatch's problems with reworking heroes? These reworks causes these heroes to lose their identity. Symmetra's first rework was done out of necessity. She felt unfinished with a lackluster ability and a niche ultimate. The rework fixed these issues while also keeping her identity. Her second rework was done out of conformity because Symmetra always felt unviable for competitive. But the thing is, Overwatch keeps trying to make itself a competitive shooter, but it really isn't. And you might be wondering why I say that. Well, it's because Overwatch has been trying to find a middle ground between having a competitive game and a casual game. This middle ground between competitive and casual will never exist. Competitive and casual are like a toxic couple. Each one wants it to be their way and they'll try to influence the other to adopt their perspective. Here's my example. When competitive decided to implement role queue, quick play was forced to get role queue as well, effectively dividing quick play in half. More recently, however, casual just influenced competitive Overwatch with the hitbox changes. These changes now make it so Widowmaker can headshot you by just shooting the foot of air next to your head instead of actually shooting your head. Even if you like these hitbox changes, you have to acknowledge that this makes the game way less competitive, since one of the biggest skills in any competitive shooter is aiming. And these back and forth changes makes me confused. What do you want to be, Overwatch? Do you want to be a serious competitive shooter like Valorant? Or do you want to be a mostly casual shooter with some competitive elements like Team Fortress 2? The truth is, Overwatch doesn't know what it wants to be. It keeps ruining its heroes' original identities in an attempt to conform with their ever-changing perspective on a meta. That's why I lost my love for Overwatch 2. It left me behind. The things that made me fall in love with it in the beginning aren't there anymore, and I know I'll never see my old Overwatch again. That's a tragedy with live service games. The game that you fell in love with becomes unrecognizable over time. Hello, I'm the android sent by the Chronicles of X Corporation. Special thank you to Freddles Bo Bitch. He's the thumbnail artist and assistant in gathering footage. Thank you, buddy. Couldn't do this without you. If you think this video earned a like, then please, by all means, you are one of us now. Your place is with your people in the subscriber count. Thank you again.